Those of you who don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Fairs. I'm a member of the York congregation. I've been coming up here 2 or 3 times a year for quite a few years now. I always enjoy the journey and the welcome I get here. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. I would now like Diana to light the chalice, please. And if you could say the words as well.
In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share.
Myrna Michelle was our minister for a few years in York, and this is a prayer that she wrote, I think, for one of the lay preachers' meetings. I'm not quite certain, but I would like to join in prayer now. We have arrived here from many places, near and far. Many of us know each other a little, or perhaps quite well, whilst other faces appear new. But we are here to share the message that, known or unknown, what we share is our humanity, and that, behind our mere appearance, there is much more to each of us. We, or you, are a chapel, church, community, welcoming of all. Yet often we find it difficult to accept ourselves. We present a quiet surface perhaps, but underneath we may feel anger towards our own selves. Often this becomes turned outwards to others. Though it is difficult to accept this, it is refreshing and cleansing when we do so. We know our own life stories. Yet there are parts we prefer to forget. We sense our own woes, but sometimes prefer not to speak of them. We can speak words of love, but this can turn to scorn. We humans are so powerful, yet the world, in all its expressions of life, requires us to be gentle. Yes, we are contradictory, yet accepting our complexity, may we find solace and peace. May we take less from the world, becoming simpler in our needs. May we take more care of our surroundings. May we speak less and listen more. And may this quietness of mind lead to a sense of self-love, which we turn outwards as love for all. Amen. Our first hymn is hymn number 147, for all ages. It's a very important part of the service. So I nearly always include something of that sort in my services wherever I take them. Now, brought in this candle, brought in a spare one just in case this one didn't light properly, but it seems to have done. Now, I used to be a science teacher, you can always tell. Put a candle here, which is burning quite happily. And as the wax beneath the candle flame starts to melt, the flame will get larger. But that's not the part really today. I'm going to put on this jam jar. I'm going to seal it. I want you to watch what happens. What has happened?
We've used all the oxygen in the air.
What can you see has happened?
Flame's gone out.
Flame's gone out. Can you see anything else? Condensation on the inside. So yes, Louise came right to the point, unfortunately. She's too clever, obviously, far too clever. The flame has gone out, and it's gone out because it used up all the oxygen. So it shows here the candle needs something out from the air. It's produced something as well. It's produced condensation because as the fuel in the wax is burnt, it's given off water vapour. So we've got a chemical reaction here. I'm not going to give you the symbols or anything like that, but basically candle wax plus oxygen from the air equals carbon dioxide plus water. So that's very, very simplified. But the important thing here is that the candle needs oxygen to burn, and that's the important thing. It needs something, we need something. We need the oxygen as well to keep us alive. So, very, very short little session for all ages. I now have a reading. Well, it's put it up in my notes. I said reading stroke prayer. It's sort of a prayer in that it has words which are prayer-like. It also has sort of, it's quite long, so that makes it a bit more like a reading. It's called Spring and Words. It's by Frank Walker. And it's in a fair field full of folk, if any of you have that book. So we meet together at a time when the earth is renewing herself, peacefully, marvellously, victoriously. No power on earth may push back this triumphant tide of life. Truly the light is sweet, and a pleasant thing it is for our eyes to behold the sun. Today's a perfect example. As we respond to the joyful rhythm of this season, we are grateful that we ourselves are part of this great and glorious ordering. We know that we are maintained by the energy that awakens in a myriad forms of life, the generosity that we may never fully measure or understand. We are grateful too for the unnumbered processes within us which we do not have to control, which of their own accord, unconsciously, work together in harmony to make possible our lives. All unseen, the goodness of the air blesses every cell and fibre of our bodies, while silently our blood circulates through our veins, food strengthens us, and water, so humble and precious and clean, daily bestows its vital blessings. We remind ourselves that we are part of the ceaseless web of life, part of the harmony in the eternal song of praise. We resolve not to break through stupidity, carelessness or greed. We resolve not to break through stupidity, carelessness or greed the lovely and delicate strands of life's web, not to bring discord and ugliness into the music of life. When we bring these things to mind, we begin to understand that in the divine will is our peace, for we sense that the love that rises so falteringly in us is linked to the love that moves the sun and other stars. At the same time, as we behold a vision of glory, we are ashamed of our failures and sins. We have the gift of awareness. We know when we have done wrong, missed the mark, strengthened the power of evil. So we pray for the cleansing, healing strength of goodwill, that our powers of thought, imagination, and speech may be well used. We pray for the power to communicate, not in words alone, but in life. We have messages to give welling up from the depths of our lives, living words that only we can speak, loving deeds that only we can do. Grant above all that our communications may be like the sowing of seeds, that those who receive them may look to a fine harvest. Those are quite strong words from Frank Walker. I was certainly impressed by them when I first read them. I thought, yes, they were suitable to include. Our next hymn is hymn number 4, one of Andrew Hill's lovely hymns. We at York are certainly blessed to have him in our congregation. Well, we don't sing them a lot, but we do sing them quite often. Okay, I now have 2 readings. Ben is going to read the first one, which is Gardening is Necessary by Betty Rathbone.
Oh no, c'est all right. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear.
Il faut cultiver notre jardin. Voltaire Candide. Voltaire came to the simplicity of this statement after a complex and sophisticated life, and it can be used as the jumping off place for a number of ways of looking at the complex task of deciding on the right way to live. We are not expected to be lazy and let the rest of the world carry us as parasites. Parasites become bloated and unhealthy. See the stories of kings told by their wise men to go and dig for their own treasure. We should see that we have our own patch in order, rather than trying to impose our ideas on other people and their affairs. We should keep ourselves alive to the beauty of what grows and sensitive to the changing of the seasons. We should expect to live with change and see the whole cycle of life from tender beginnings to growth and decay as valuable, not expect to be able to stay all the time with the bits that we enjoy most. We need to realize where we are in our life cycle and continually revise our ideas of our place in the world. We can learn both to be patient and to be opportunist while we are trying to work with the natural world. Some plants will flower only after many years of care. Seeds are best sown when there are rain and warmth available. Removing weeds before the seeds saves much future trouble. In finding that we are responsible but not omnipotent, we may undergo the best of spiritual discipline.
Thank you very much. And that was from Heart and Mind, which is a very, very, very good Unitarian publication, UK Unitarian publication. The next reading is it's called The Labyrinth, and this becomes my prop in this. So I'll interrupt the reading to add some bits to it. I walked slowly and deliberately toward the centre of the labyrinth, breathing the fresh autumn breeze. Around me, the red sumac is vivid against the clear blue sky. Tiny morning glories bloom at my feet. Their blossoms open chalices, reflecting their paler blue back to the sky. The stones marking the circular path are the colour of bone, smooth and curved. As I enter the labyrinth, my thoughts wheel and tumble about, like the birds wheeling above the lake. The birds' swirling dance is punctuated by occasional dives, as each in turn seeks fish from the depths below. Finding sustenance or not, they soar up again, bright white, rising on the currents of air. Nearing the centre of the labyrinth, I try to let some of my swirling thoughts dive deep like the birds. What kinds of fish might be raised from the depths, impaled on the sharp beak of awareness? I reach the centre, where someone has placed a milky white crystal. It is meant to help focus, I guess, but the sunlight is only permitted to enter the outer layers of crystal, while the murk within remains impenetrable. I sit near the centre of the grassy circle, hoping for some great truth to emerge from the murk of my musing brain. I often feel like that, murk of my brain, hoping something will come from it. I turn from the blue October sky and look closely at the earth. Paul Tillich is called God, the ground of being, and I've always liked the image. I enjoy the sensation of being held fast in the ultimate by something as elemental and irresistible as gravity. As I look closely at the cropped grass and small rocks around me, I become aware of a small grey pebble, almost a perfect sphere. I begin to roll it around with my pencil and muse on the spherical planet on which I sit. I try to meditate on this small model of Earth, but I am distracted by its unlikely shape. It occurs to me that this tiny dove-grey sphere is a gift from the universe, just for me. I pick it up and begin to roll it around between thumb and fingers, enjoying the roundness, satisfied to be the recipient of such a fine gift. I imagine the centering energy emanates from its core and infuses my body. As I glance back at the ground, though, I see a scattering of these small grey orbs. Before I can ponder the significance, my gift from the universe crumbles under the pressure from my fingers, and I finally have a revelation. Rabbit poo. I've been meditating on rabbit poo, and the laughing call of the diving birds echoes in my ears. I spend a moment reflecting on the rabbits' experience of the labyrinth. There are undoubtedly many paths to the centre for them, and I am humbled as I think of my own deliberate walk to this place. The rabbits see both as dinner table and toilet. And I realise that I must look pretty silly to the rabbits, sitting in the midst of good grazing land, wasting dinner time, pondering rocks and playing with poo. And maybe they're right. Sometimes I get caught up in the search for ultimate meaning, yearning my question to the universe. Is this all there is? And sometimes I sense a response. What good will it do to look for more until you can understand what's in front of you? And this little egg-shaped stone I brought with me because it's not rabbit poo, it's a stone I acquired from my ex-husband's, now partner's, family garden. So I could do a whole series on that path, but I won't. And my daughter at the time collected eggs, which I've inherited because she decided she didn't want them anymore. And seeing as I bought most of them, I thought, well, I spent good money on them, they're pretty, I'm keeping them. So this is in amongst the collection of eggs. and it is actually quite pretty. It's a beautifully rounded by nature little pebble. It was from a garden in North London, and it's quite crystalline in nature. I presume it's limestone. I think it is. I haven't done the chemical test on it, but it has a look of limestone, and it's quite beautiful. So you may look at it later if you wish. It's not rabbit poo. But yes, I have done experiments with rabbit poo. I have in the past when I taught biology, gone out and collected it, taken it back to the lab and had kids burn it and see how much calorific energy was produced by burning so many grams of poo. So yes. Now, I was a bit bad, I'm afraid. I didn't check with David whether he knew the hymns or whether you knew the hymns. This next hymn apparently is one he doesn't think you've had before. So it went very well indeed, David. So there's been a few nods from the people here, so thank you. Now, dependence, independence and interdependence. Very much biological words. I told you I'm a biology teacher or retired. This service developed from a TV programme that I watched some months ago. Now, normally I don't have a pad of paper next to me when I'm watching TV programmes, and I don't take notes. But this time I did, which is just as well, because I'd have forgotten the fine detail if I hadn't. It was presented by Chris Packham. It was about interdependence in the Amazon rainforest. Now we all have, I'm sure, in the past, or possibly still do enjoy Brazil nuts. Yes? Yes. Well, the Brazil nut tree seeds in the wild can only be dispersed by a particular species of agouti. The agouti is a small mammal, it's a rodent, so it has quite sharp teeth that carry on growing throughout life, the front teeth, and it likes to gnaw things. And it feeds on the Brazil nuts. They find the ripe pods on the forest floor underneath the trees. Each pod contains quite a few Brazil nuts, and the Brazil nuts are the tree seeds. The agouti nibbles into the pod, extracts and then eats one Brazil nut seed. One Brazil nut. These are large, as you know, and full of energy. And the agouti is a fairly small mammal, so one Brazil nut is sufficient to fill its pouches, or its stomach, quite comfortably. So it only needs to eat one at a time. It gives them sufficient energy. It doesn't eat the rest. Instead, it extracts them from the pod, carries them away, and buries them for later consumption. Now, they have a very good memory. They can remember where they've buried most of them. But sometimes the agouti might get killed and eaten itself. Sometimes they bury more than they need. Sometimes they just forget. So some of the seeds germinate and may eventually grow into new Brazil nut trees. So that's one sort of part of the story. In the Brazil nut tree, about maybe 10, 20 feet high, maybe, no, more than that, maybe 20 to 30 feet high up in the tree, there grows an orchid. A species-specific orchid. That means it's an orchid that's only found in Brazil nut trees. And that orchid is pollinated by the male orchid bee. This male bee visits the orchid not to feed, not to collect the nectar, but it visits the orchid to collect a wax. It very carefully rubs over its body. Now this wax is particularly attractive to the female orchid bee. So the male orchid bee rubs the wax from the flower onto his body. The female orchid bee smells the scent of the wax. I suppose it must make a some sort of different smell once it's rubbed over the male, because she can, it's normally, I mean normally in moths certainly it's the male that's attracted by the female scent, But in the orchid bee, it's the female that comes to the male and is fertilised by the male orchid bee. She also visits the flowers. She visits the orchid flowers to collect nectar as a food. So she pollinates the orchid. Sorry, I've got that wrong. No, I've got that wrong. My apologies. I read this twice when I wrote it. The male pollinates the orchid bee flower. The female comes to the Brazil nut tree because she smells the wax on the male's body. She's much larger, so she can't pollinate the orchid flower. She comes to visit the Brazil nut flower, and she pollinates that as she's collecting nectar from the Brazil nut flower. The smaller males and other smaller bee species are too small to pollinate the Brazil nut flower. They can't expose the part that produces the nectar, and they can't reach it either. So the female orchid bee is the only bee that can actually pollinate the Brazil nut flower. So the agouti eats and disperses the seeds. The Brazil nut tree needs the female bee to pollinate the flowers, and the female bee needs the male bee to fertilise her, whilst the male bee needs the orchid flower so he can collect the wax to attract the female. At the same time, he pollinates the orchid flower. So that to me is just a brilliant case of interdependence. And it's in a very, very complex ecosystem, British ecosystem, because we've been inhabited by man, and so much has been done by man within our ecosystem. Our ecosystem is much less complex, whereas the Amazon rainforest is a very, very complex ecosystem. So this interdependence and species-specific relationship also reduces competition. And Chris Packham finished the programme by saying, science is the art of understanding truth and beauty. This always rather shocked the pupils when I used to tell them this. When a woman becomes pregnant, the unborn baby takes all its requirements, that's food, water and oxygen, from its mother. The new life is related to its mother, but it's a new separate being with its own genetic identity. It is parasitic on the mother. I mean, you don't think of your unborn baby being a parasite, but of course it is. Luckily it only stays there a shortish time. It's completely dependent on her. When the child is born, it continues to be dependent on the mother, but also increasingly on the father. Children will remain dependent on their parents, relatives, teachers and other adults within their sphere till they become teenagers or older. Now, I talked about the service with my Chinese lodger, and he was really quite shocked. He didn't like the idea of being dependent on other people. He said, well, his parents taught him to be independent from a very, very early age, and he was very definitely independent from them. I asked, well, do they give any money? He said, a bit. I mean, he's not actually taking much from his parents now. He's in his 20s. He's not a student anymore. It's his wife, who's my other lodger. She's in her second year with me, and she is a student. She's doing a PhD. They both work. She only works she can do 20 hours a week. He can work nearly full time. So they're both, between them, earning sufficient money to be self-sufficient rather than needing help from China. But he didn't like the idea of being dependent on other people. And I said, well, you are. And we had a bit of a discussion about it. For my daughter, It was a dreaded 15 from being a very, very nice young, nice daughter, involved in guides and so on. She suddenly had hormones and developed boyfriends and various other dreaded things, which again I'm not going into. And she fought for independence very definitely. But she was still dependent on me in many ways. When she went away to Manchester to university, she became much more independent, but was still extremely grateful for the monetary help that her father and I could give her. So she was less dependent on us, but still dependent on the lecturers, obviously, and the friends she lived with. She's now a wife and mother in her own right, and is continuing the journey of dependence and independence with her own children. Independence may be won with hard work, yet we are none of us truly independent. All of us rely on so many people, many of them not even known to us. From the taxi driver who picked me up on time this morning, to the train driver and the sandwich maker who went down the carriage. I didn't actually buy a sandwich, but they were there available if I wanted. And all of you here who've made my journey worthwhile. We are all dependent on other people in so many ways. So we are all part of the interdependent web of life. And of course, as we age, we will become more dependent on some people such as doctors, nurses and care workers. On the front sheet of the order of service, if you have a look at it, you can see I've done just a little bit of the web of life that relates to me. And I think you're looking at the wrong page. Excuse me, lady next to Morris. You're looking, goes, well, that's not the right order of service.
No, it's best.
You can see I put me in the centre. I have two children, they're the two A's. My son is the A on the left, and his wife, he got married last summer, is the B on the left of him. I put my daughter as the second A, and she's married, so the B on the same level of her as her husband, and the two kids are the two B's above. And then E are just the teachers or other people who are involved with the children, but also have interrelationships, involvement, meetings and so on with both my daughter and her husband. Then I put C's. C represent neighbours who, my neighbours mostly have interrelationships with me and with each other. We have quite a close group of friends within on our street. D, the D I put on his or her own at the bottom with an arrow going just towards me. That could be the driver of the train who I didn't relate to or wasn't involved with him or her personally, but they still did something for me and that they drove the train safely. They might have been involved in some other way with one of my neighbours, one of my friends. Every person on that web of life will of course be in the centre of their own interdependent web. And all of us, I'm sure, will have a lot more people that we're involved in. If I'd added everybody who I'm involved with in one way or another, then it would have been a struggle, and none of it would have been decipherable. So that's just an idea of how we, as Unitarians, are involved with people via the internet who are at churches throughout the whole country. I'm involved with people I've met in India, in the Megalayan congregations. I raise money, some from given by people here, to help the people there to build a church, which hopefully is now being built. So we relate to people in very, very, very many ways. what is important to realise is that our actions may affect many people. And so I think always, within our interrelationship, we should be aware of that. When I was a child, I used to love this rhyme, and I'm sure most of you have heard it. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of the shoe, the horse was lost. For want of the horse, the soldier was lost. For want of the soldier, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the war was lost. For want of the war, the king was lost. For want of the king, the world changed. All for the loss of the nail. Have you heard of that before? Yes. So it's all the older people have heard of it before by the looks of it. Sorry, Louise. Middle-aged, no, younger middle-aged.
Careful.
Can I hide? I apologise completely. Very difficult. You know what I mean. Ben didn't reckon. Did you reckon? No. So, are you the two youngest people here?
Possibly.
Possibly. Or two of the younger people here. That's it. So, I certainly recognised it. I know it. And the other people who are well, nearly all younger than me. Oh dear, this is awful. I'm getting old too quickly, it's terrible. So at a very early age, that poem taught me to understand how one action or event could be dependent on another, and another, and another. So I pray that all of us will always be aware from how our actions may affect others. Music.